You know, people always say that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that family comes first, that you should sacrifice everything for your children, that love conquers all. Well, I'm here to tell you that's a beautiful lie they sell you until the day your own son looks you in the eye and tells you you're worthless.
I still remember the exact moment I realized we had raised a stranger. We were sitting in what used to be our living room, the one we decorated together over 40 years of marriage, and my son's wife looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. She said, "Maybe it's time you both faced reality. You're not needed here anymore."
Not needed. Can you imagine? We built a $15 million logistics empire from a single delivery truck I bought with a loan I'm still proud I paid back early. We put that boy through Harvard Business School. We bought him his first house, his first car. We even paid for that wedding where his bride wore a dress that cost more than my father earned in a decade.
But this isn't a story about money, though money plays its part. This is about what happens when you give everything to someone who mistakes your generosity for weakness. When you love so completely that you forget to protect yourself. When you trust so deeply that you hand over the keys to your own destruction.
They thought we were just two old fools holding on to the past. Senile, probably. Out of touch with modern business. My son actually said those words to me. "Dad, your generation's methods are obsolete." He said it while sitting in the office I designed, running the company I founded, using the strategies I taught him.
And I watched it happen. I watched my sweet boy, the one I used to read bedtime stories to, transform into someone I didn't recognize. His wife whispered poison in his ear, and he drank it like honey. But the worst part? The absolute worst part? We saw it coming and we stayed silent because we loved him.
Until the day they tried to have us declared mentally incompetent, so they could take legal control of everything. That's when the gloves came off. That's when Martha and I looked at each other and remembered something important. We didn't survive 40 years of building a business from nothing by being weak.
So this is our story. The story of how we lost our son and found each other all over again. How we went from being humiliated in our own home to teaching the hardest lesson we've ever had to teach. And why, despite everything, we do it all again.
Let me take you back to where this really started. Not the dramatic confrontation, not the moment everything fell apart, but the quiet beginning. The kind of beginning you don't even notice until you're looking back and connecting the dots. It was 2019, and Martha and I were celebrating our 45th wedding anniversary. We decided to make it special, really special, because we'd been working so hard for so long that we'd forgotten what it felt like to just breathe. I remember we went to this little restaurant in Napa Valley, the kind of place where they know your name and your wine preference, and I looked across the table at this woman who'd stood beside me through everything: bankruptcy scares, health crisis, the death of both our parents, and I thought, we made it. We actually made it.
Oh, that trip was wonderful. Do you remember that little cottage we rented, Henry? With the garden full of lavender and those enormous oak trees? We sat on the porch every morning with our coffee, not talking about business or obligations or family drama, just existing together. It was during that trip that you first mentioned wanting to step back from the company. You said, "Martha, I think it's time. We've earned the right to be selfish for once." And I agreed completely. We'd been talking about it for years, this mythical retirement where we'd travel and read books and maybe finally take those painting classes I'd always wanted to try.
The company was doing phenomenally well. Better than well, actually. We'd just closed a contract with 3 major retail chains that effectively doubled our revenue stream. Our logistics network covered 17 states. We had over 200 employees, and our reputation in the industry was rock solid. Michael, our son, he'd been working in the business for about 8 years at that point, ever since he graduated from Harvard. I'll be honest, I was proud. Maybe too proud. He had the education I never got, the polish, the connections. He spoke the language of modern business in a way I never could. Spreadsheets, analytics, digital integration, all that stuff that makes my head spin.
But there were little things. Small things that I noticed but convinced myself I was imagining. The way Michael would sometimes cut Henry off in meetings with a little laugh, like, "Oh, Dad, that's not how we do things anymore." Or how his wife, Jessica, would rearrange things in our house when she visited, moving our photographs to less prominent places and replacing them with abstract art we didn't understand. Once, I came home to find she'd donated half my cookbooks to Goodwill because she said the kitchen looked cluttered. I was furious, but Michael defended her. He said, "Mom, she's just trying to help. You should be grateful she cares enough to organize things."
Grateful. That became their favorite word. We should be grateful they were willing to take over the business. Grateful they were letting us stay involved at all. Grateful they didn't just put us in a nursing home, which Jessica actually suggested once during an argument. She said it like it was a reasonable option, like we were burdens instead of the people who'd built everything they were enjoying. But I kept telling myself it was generational differences, that I was being sensitive, that I needed to adapt. My own father had struggled to let go of his small hardware store when he got older, and I'd been frustrated with him. I didn't want to be that old man holding on to control out of pride.
The transition was supposed to be gradual. That's what we agreed on in 2020, right before the pandemic hit. Michael would become CEO, but Henry would stay on as chairman of the board with full voting rights on major decisions. I'd continue handling the charity foundation we'd started, which supported underprivileged children's education, something very close to my heart because I'd grown up poor myself. We thought we were being smart, protective even. We kept 51% of the company's shares between the two of us. Michael had 25%, and the remaining 24% was distributed among key employees as incentive packages. On paper, it looked perfect. In reality, we just painted a target on our backs.
The pandemic changed everything, though not in the way you might think. Logistics companies like ours were suddenly essential. We were moving medical supplies, food, emergency equipment. Our revenue tripled in the first 6 months of 2020. Tripled. We went from a successful regional company to a genuinely significant player almost overnight. And Michael handled it brilliantly, I'll give him that. He had the energy, the quick decision-making, the ability to adapt on the fly. He negotiated contracts I never could have landed. He modernized our entire tracking system in 3 months. He was exactly what the company needed in that moment, and I told him so repeatedly. I was proud of my son. God help me, I was so proud.
But Jessica changed too. Suddenly, we started seeing articles about them in business magazines. The new face of logistics. Young CEO revolutionizes family business. Power couple transforms traditional company into tech-forward enterprise. She started styling herself as some sort of business influencer, posting on social media about work-life balance and leadership, always with photographs of their beautiful home, their luxury cars, their vacation destinations. And in every interview, Michael's origin story got shorter and shorter. Eventually, it was just I took over the family business with no mention of who built that business or how we'd supported him every step of the way.
I noticed it first in late 2021. We were having a board meeting, and I raised a concern about expanding too quickly. We'd been approached by a venture capital firm offering a massive injection of cash in exchange for 15% equity and 2 board seats. Something about it felt wrong to me. The terms were aggressive, the timeline was rushed, and I'd learned over 40 years in business to trust my gut when something smells off. I said, "Let's slow down and have our lawyers review this more thoroughly." Michael looked at me like I'd just suggested we go back to using carrier pigeons. He said, "Dad, with all due respect, you don't understand modern capital markets. This is how growth happens now. We can't let fear and outdated thinking hold us back."
Outdated thinking! He called his father's instincts, the instincts that had built everything, outdated thinking. I saw Henry's face go white, then red. But he stayed calm. He just said, "I'm exercising my right as chairman to table this discussion for 2 weeks while we conduct proper due diligence." Michael actually rolled his eyes. Rolled his eyes at his own father in front of our entire executive team. And Jessica, who'd somehow gotten herself appointed as chief strategy officer despite having a degree in marketing and no actual logistics experience, she jumped in. Henry, we appreciate everything you've built. We really do, but Michael is CEO now. You need to trust his vision.
Trust his vision. But I'd asked for 2 weeks, not 2 years. I'd asked for due diligence, not blind faith. That night, Martha and I sat up late talking about it. She'd noticed things too. How Michael had started excluding us from certain meetings, how financial reports we used to receive weekly were now coming monthly, and with less detail, how Jessica had suggested 3 times that we should consider selling our house and downsizing to something more appropriate for our age. We were 72 and 70 years old respectively, still healthy, still sharp, still very much in control of our faculties. But they were building a narrative, weren't they? The narrative that we were slipping, that we were becoming a liability, that the company would be better off if we just gracefully faded into the background.
I'll be honest, that scared me. Not because I cared about the money or the title or any of that, but because I suddenly realized we were vulnerable. We'd given Michael so much power, moved so many operational responsibilities to him, that if he really wanted to push us out, he had significant leverage. And worse, we'd raised him to be ambitious, competitive, and strategic. All the qualities that made him a good CEO could be weaponized against us if Jessica kept whispering in his ear that we were obstacles rather than assets. I started keeping copies of important documents at home. Nothing dramatic, just board meeting minutes, financial statements, correspondence. Just in case.
The next incident happened about 3 months later, in early 2022. We had a family dinner at Michael and Jessica's house, this gorgeous place in the suburbs that we'd helped them buy. 6 bedrooms, pool, the works. We'd been doing these dinners monthly for years, a tradition Martha insisted on because she said family that eats together stays together. But this particular night had a different feeling to it. Jessica had made reservations at an expensive restaurant instead of cooking, which was fine, but when we got there were 2 other couples already at the table. Business associates of Michael's, people we'd never met. Suddenly, our family dinner had become a networking opportunity.
And the conversation was excruciating. These people, they were talking about disruption and pivoting and leveraging synergies in that way people do when they're more interested in sounding smart than saying anything meaningful. Michael was holding court, telling stories about turning the company around and modernizing legacy systems. Legacy systems. That's what he called the business practices that had sustained steady growth for 4 decades. At one point, one of the wives, I think her name was Amber or Ashley, something like that, she turned to me and said, "It must be so nice to be retired. What do you do with all your free time?" I said, "Actually, I'm not retired. I run the company's charitable foundation." She looked confused, like she didn't know what I was talking about, and Jessica jumped in with, "Oh, Martha does some lovely volunteer work."
Volunteer work. The foundation had a $2 million annual budget and funded scholarships for over 300 kids. But sure, volunteer work. I saw red. I actually opened my mouth to say something sharp, but Martha put her hand on my knee under the table, that signal we developed over decades that meant, "Not here, not now." She was right, of course. Making a scene would just confirm whatever narrative Jessica was building. But driving home that night, I said to Martha, "We need to be careful. Something's happening, and I don't think we're going to like where it ends."
The worst part was that Michael seemed oblivious to how condescending they were being. Or maybe he wasn't oblivious. Maybe he'd started to believe it himself, this idea that we were just doddering old people lucky to have such a capable son. The next week, I got a call from our accountant, Tom, who'd been with us since the beginning. He said, "Martha, I'm calling as a friend, not as your accountant. Michael asked me to prepare an assessment of your personal assets, your house, your savings, your investments. He said it was for estate planning purposes. But the level of detail he's asking for, it feels off. I wanted you to know." My stomach dropped. Estate planning. We weren't even sick.
When Martha told me about that call, I knew we'd crossed some kind of line. I'd been in business long enough to recognize when someone was gathering ammunition. So I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I called in a favor from an old friend who works in corporate law. I asked him, hypothetically, what options might exist if a majority shareholder wanted to remove a CO. He explained the process, the board votes required, the legal challenges we might face. Then he asked me a question that stopped me cold. He said, "Henry, do you have your original shareholder agreements, stock certificates, and corporate bylaws stored somewhere safe?" "Not in the office. I mean truly safe." I realized I didn't. Everything was in the company's files, managed by our corporate attorney, who Michael had hired 2 years ago.
That weekend, we went to the office. It was Saturday, and the building was empty. Henry used his key, he still had a key at that point, and we went to the records room. It took us 3 hours of searching, but we found what we needed. Copies of everything. The original incorporation documents, the shareholder agreements, amendments, and modifications over the years, everything that proved our ownership and our rights. We made copies of the copies and stored them in 3 different locations, a safe deposit box, with my sister in another state, and with our personal attorney whom Michael had never met. Call it paranoia if you want, but it saved us in the end.
April 2022 was when things escalated from uncomfortable to genuinely hostile. Michael called a special board meeting with only 48 hours' notice. That alone violated our bylaws, which required 7 days for non-emergency meetings, but I let it slide because I wanted to see what he was up to. The agenda was vague. Discussion of organizational structure and leadership transitions. 8 of us sat around the conference table. Michael, Jessica, 3 board members who were company employees and therefore loyal to Michael as CEO, 2 outside board members we'd brought in years ago, and me. Martha wasn't on the board. We'd intentionally kept her separate to avoid nepotism accusations, but she was sitting in as foundation director.
I'll never forget the look on Michael's face when he started his presentation. It was rehearsed, confident, almost pitying. He had slides. Actual PowerPoint slides about his parents. He started by thanking us for our service, which should have been my first clue that something terrible was coming. Then he presented what he called a roadmap for sustainable leadership transition. Basically, he wanted Henry to step down as chairman immediately, transition to a purely advisory role with no voting rights, and accept what he called an appropriate compensation package for our shares. The number he mentioned was generous by most standards, but it was maybe 60% of what the company was actually worth after the pandemic boom.
I let him finish his whole presentation. All 20 minutes of it, where he essentially argued that Martha and I were holding the company back from reaching its full potential. He had charts showing how companies perform better with contemporary leadership. He had quotes from business journals about the dangers of founder syndrome. He had testimonials from employees, anonymous, conveniently, suggesting that my presence in the office was creating confusion about chain of command. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, really. Frame the parents as loving but incompetent, the son as reluctant but responsible, and the whole thing is painful but necessary.
When he finished, there was this awful silence. The employee board members were staring at their hands. The outside board members looked uncomfortable. And Jessica was smiling. Actually smiling, like she'd just won something. Then Michael looked directly at Henry and said, "Dad, I know this is hard to hear, but I'm doing this because I love you. Both of you. The stress of running a company this size, at your age, with your health concerns, it's not safe anymore. It's time to let go. Health concerns." We didn't have any health concerns beyond normal age-related stuff, but he said it so confidently that I saw the board members nodding along.
I stood up slowly, made a show of gathering my papers, and I said just one sentence. "This meeting is adjourned due to improper notice, and I'm invoking my right as majority shareholder to dismiss this proposal without vote." Michael's face went from pity to shock to rage in about 3 seconds. He said, "You can't do that." I said, "Read the bylaws, son. The ones your mother and I wrote. Majority shareholder has absolute veto power over leadership structure changes. Then I walked out. Martha followed me. Behind us, I could hear Jessica hissing something at Michael, but I didn't stop to listen.
The drive home was quiet. Henry was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. When we got inside, he went straight to his study and closed the door. I heard him on the phone for the next 2 hours. I found out later he was calling every single board member, every major client, every key employee he still had a relationship with. Not to badmouth Michael, but to gently remind them who'd built the relationships they were benefiting from. It was a chess move. Michael had tried to corner us, so Henry was quietly reminding everyone that the king could still protect himself.
The retaliation was swift and petty. Within a week, my company email was accidentally deactivated. My parking spot, the one that had my name on it for 20 years, was reassigned to a new hire. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Amy who'd always been friendly, started looking uncomfortable when I came in, like she'd been instructed not to engage with me. My office keycard stopped working. When I called IT, they said there was a system upgrade, and I'd need to request new credentials through HR. I'd founded the damn company.
They came after me too, in a different way. Jessica called me for lunch, just the two of us, and I naively thought maybe she wanted to smooth things over. We met at this trendy salad place she loved, and for the first 20 minutes, it was all small talk and false warmth. Then she said, "Martha, I want to be direct with you because I respect you too much to play games." Which, of course, meant she was about to play games. She told me that Michael was genuinely worried about Henry's mental state. She said he'd been forgetting things in meetings, repeating himself, showing signs of confusion. All lies, of course, but she delivered them with such concern, such fake compassion, that if I hadn't known better, I might have believed her.
Martha told me about that conversation that night, and I realized what they were doing. They were building a case, documenting our supposed decline, creating a narrative of incompetence, probably working with their lawyer to explore options for having us declared unfit. It's a common tactic in family business disputes, apparently. If you can prove the elderly shareholders are mentally incompetent, you can petition for guardianship or conservatorship and effectively take control of their assets. The fact that my own son was considering this, that my own son would destroy me rather than wait a few years for natural succession, that broke something in me.
But it clarified something too. We'd been operating from a position of love and hope, believing that ultimately family bonds would prevail, that Michael would remember who we were and what we'd sacrificed for him. That conversation with Jessica snapped me out of that delusion. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was war. And in war, you can't afford to be sentimental. That night, Henry and I sat down and made a plan. Not a reactive plan, not a defensive plan, but an offensive strategy that would use every legal and financial tool we had available.
First move was securing independent medical evaluations. We went to 3 different doctors, none of them are regular physicians, and had comprehensive cognitive assessments done. Memory tests, psychological evaluations, the works. All 3 concluded we were in excellent mental health for our age, with no signs of dementia, confusion, or impairment. We had those results notarized and filed with our personal attorney. If Michael tried to play the incompetence card, we had ammunition. Second move was financial documentation. We pulled 7 years of tax returns, bank statements, investment records, everything that showed we were managing our personal affairs perfectly well.
Third move was the most important one, and it was my idea. I suggested we hire a forensic accountant to audit the company books. Not because we thought Michael was embezzling, we didn't, actually, I don't think he's a thief, but because I wanted to understand exactly where the company stood financially and whether any decisions had been made that we weren't aware of. Henry was hesitant at first. He said, "Martha, if we audit our own son, there's no coming back from that." And I said, "Henry, he tried to have you declared incompetent. We're already past the point of no return." Okay.
The forensic accountant's report came back in June, and it was illuminating in ways I didn't expect. Michael wasn't stealing, but he was making decisions that bordered on reckless. He'd leveraged company assets to secure personal loans for himself and Jessica, loans totaling almost $3 million that were technically legal since the board had approved them, but the board votes happened in meetings I hadn't been invited to. He'd also moved forward with that venture capital deal I'd wanted to table, giving away equity at a valuation that was criminally low considering our growth trajectory. Basically, he diluted our ownership and increased the company's debt load to fund his and Jessica's lifestyle.
When I saw those numbers, I felt physically sick. Not because of the money itself, but because it confirmed that Michael saw the company as his personal piggy bank rather than the legacy we'd built for him to steward. There were other things too. He'd cancelled the scholarship program I'd been running, calling it non-essential expenditure, and redirected that budget to a marketing campaign that featured him and Jessica as the faces of the new brand. $2 million that had been changing kids' lives was now paying for photoshoots and social media influencers.
That scholarship program was Martha's baby. She'd grown up poor, worked her way through community college while cleaning houses, and she'd always said that education was the only real ladder out of poverty. We'd sent 317 kids to college over 15 years. Some of them had become doctors, teachers, engineers. We'd gotten thank you letters, graduation announcements, wedding invitations. Those kids were our legacy in a way the business never could be. And Michael had killed the program with a single budget meeting, probably didn't even think twice about it.
I cried that night. Really cried, not the dignified tears you wipe away quickly but the ugly sobbing where you can't catch your breath. Henry held me and didn't say anything because what was there to say? Our son had become someone we didn't recognize. Someone who valued appearances over substance, who measured success in magazine covers rather than lives changed. I grieved for the little boy who used to volunteer at the scholarship events, who'd help me set up chairs and hand out certificates, who'd seemed so proud of the work we were doing. Where did that child go?
But grief is a luxury you can't afford in the middle of a war. We had the audit results. We had our medical evaluations. We had documentation of every questionable decision Michael had made. Now we needed leverage. I spent the next week reaching out to the venture capital firm that had bought into the company. I introduced myself properly. They'd never actually met me, had only dealt with Michael, and I asked pointed questions about their investment thesis and due diligence process. Turned out they'd been told the company was founder-free, that Michael had full control, that there were no complications with legacy shareholders. Michael had lied to them.
While Henry was working that angle, I was rebuilding relationships with our original employees, the people who'd been with us from the early days. We'd always treated our employees well, profit-sharing bonuses, health benefits that exceeded industry standards, company picnics where we actually knew everyone's names and their kids' names. But in recent years, as Michael had grown the company, new hires didn't know us. They knew Michael and Jessica, the young power couple with the MBA credentials and the polished presentations. I started having coffee with the old guard, not saying anything explicit, just reminding them we existed and we cared.
In July, Michael made his biggest mistake. He sent us a formal letter, through his attorney, offering to buy out our remaining shares for $12 million. $12 million. The company was conservatively worth $70 million at that point, and we owned 51%. Our shares were worth at least $35 million. Probably closer to $40 million if we factored in projected growth. He was offering us roughly a third of what we were owed, and the letter had this condescending tone about how this was a generous offer given current market conditions, and how we should seriously consider our options at this stage of life.
The letter also included a veiled threat. It said that if we didn't accept within 30 days, Michael would be forced to explore alternative corporate restructuring options that might not be as favorable to all parties. Alternative restructuring options. We had our lawyer translate that. He was threatening to bankrupt the company, take its value, and leave us with worthless shares if we didn't surrender. It was a nuclear option, mutually assured destruction, but he was arrogant enough to think we'd blink first.
That letter was the best thing that could have happened to us. It was evidence. Clear, documented evidence of coercion and bad faith negotiation. We had our attorney send a response that was beautiful in its simplicity. Offer declined. All future communication must go through legal counsel. Henry and Martha Carter retain all rights as majority shareholders and will be exercising those rights fully going forward. Then we got to work on the real plan.
The nuclear option, as we called it. If Michael wanted to play hardball, we'd show him what hardball actually looked like. But we had to be smart about it. We couldn't just fire him as CEO, that would look vindictive and could hurt the company's performance, which would hurt us too. We needed something more elegant, more permanent, something that would protect the company while removing his ability to hurt us. We spent weeks with our attorney, exploring options, until we found the perfect solution hiding in plain sight in our corporate structure.
August 15th, 2022. That's the date everything changed. We called a special board meeting with proper 7-day notice, full agenda disclosure, everything by the book. The agenda item was simple. Vote on proposed corporate restructuring and new operational framework. Michael assumed it was his proposal coming back for discussion, that maybe we'd been worn down and were ready to negotiate. He showed up confident, Jessica by his side, their attorney in tow. The outside board members were there, the employee directors, everyone seated around that table where we'd spent decades making decisions.
I was there too, this time as a voting participant. See, one of the things our attorney had discovered was that the bylaws allowed the majority shareholder to appoint themselves or any proxy to the board at any time with 72 hours' notice. Henry had submitted that notice the previous week, appointing me as a full board member with voting rights. Michael's attorney had objected, of course, but our corporate counsel confirmed it was entirely legal. So now we had 2 votes out of 9, but more importantly, we had absolute veto power on anything involving ownership structure.
I started the meeting by thanking everyone for coming. Very cordial, very professional. Then I said, "Before we begin, I want to address some concerns that have come to our attention regarding corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility." I had Michael's attention now. I could see him trying to figure out where this was going. Then I dropped the first bomb. We've completed an independent forensic audit of company finances covering the past 18 months. I'm distributing copies of the executive summary now. You should have seen his face when those reports hit the table.
The summary was damning. It outlined every questionable loan, every conflict of interest, every decision made in meetings we'd been excluded from. It documented how Michael had misrepresented the company's ownership structure to investors. It showed how the venture capital deal had undervalued the company by at least 40%, which suggested either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud. And it highlighted the cancellation of the scholarship program and redirection of funds to personal branding exercises. All presented in neutral, factual language with supporting documentation.
Michael tried to interrupt about 30 seconds in. He said, "This is ridiculous, you can't just..." But I cut him off. I said, "Michael, you will have your opportunity to respond, but right now I'm presenting information to the board. Please hold your comments." The look he gave me could have melted steel. Jessica put her hand on his arm like she was restraining him, and I remembered how many times over the past year they'd treated me with that same condescending patience, like I was a child who didn't understand adult conversations.
Henry continued, "Based on these findings, Martha and I are proposing a new operational structure. Effective immediately, the CEO role will report directly to an executive committee consisting of the board chairman and 2 appointed members. All financial decisions above $50,000 will require executive committee approval. All personnel decisions at the director level or above will require executive committee approval. And all external communications about company ownership or structure will require executive committee review." Essentially, we were putting Michael in a cage. He'd still be CEO, but he couldn't make any significant moves without our explicit permission.
The employee board members were squirming. They knew their jobs depended on Michael, but they also knew we were the majority shareholders. The outside board members looked relieved, honestly. I think they'd been uncomfortable with how much power Michael had consolidated. Our corporate counsel confirmed that the proposal was entirely legal and consistent with our rights as majority shareholders. Then I called for a vote. Martha and I voted yes, obviously. The 2 outside board members voted yes. We needed 1 more vote out of the remaining 5.
There was this long, horrible silence. Then David Chin, one of our original employees who'd been with us for 23 years and held a board seat, he cleared his throat. He said, "I'd like to speak before voting." Michael looked at him with this expression of total confidence, like obviously David would vote his way. But David didn't look at Michael. He looked at me and Henry, and he said, "I've been thinking a lot lately about what kind of company I want to work for. About what kind of leaders I want to follow. And I remember who gave me my first real chance, who promoted me when nobody else believed in me, who came to my wedding and my daughter's baptism." Then he voted yes.
4-3. Before anyone else could vote, we had majority approval. The proposal passed. Michael stood up so fast his chair fell backward. He was shaking with rage, his face was red, and he said, "This is insane! You can't do this. I'm the CEO. I built this company into what it is today." And I said, very quietly, "No, son. Martha and I built this company. You just drove it for a little while. And you drove it recklessly, so now we're taking back the keys."
Jessica started yelling then. She called us ungrateful, senile, vindictive. She said we were destroying our son's career out of spite, that we were going to regret this, that their attorney would tie us up in court for years. Our attorney calmly explained that they were welcome to sue, but given the documented evidence of misconduct and the clear legal basis for our actions, they'd be wasting their money. That's when Michael said the thing I'll never forget. He looked directly at me and said, "You're not my mother anymore. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see me succeed."
Not his mother anymore. I watched Martha's face crumble when he said that, watched 47 years of motherhood get dismissed in a single sentence. I stood up and I said, "This meeting is adjourned. Michael, you'll receive a formal letter outlining the new reporting structure and expectations. We expect your full cooperation going forward. If you can't work within these parameters, you're welcome to resign." He stormed out, Jessica following him, their attorney scrambling to keep up. The conference room felt like the aftermath of a bomb going off.
I couldn't stay in that room. I walked out, found an empty office, and I broke down. David Chin came in a few minutes later and just sat with me while I cried. He didn't say anything, just sat there, and somehow that made it worse because it meant he understood how much it hurt. Finally, I managed to say, "Did we do the right thing?" And he said, "Mrs. Carter, you saved the company. More than that, you reminded all of us what integrity looks like." But in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I'd lost my son.
The next few weeks were brutal. Michael complied with the new structure on paper, but fought us on everything substantively. Every decision required an argument. Every approval became a negotiation. He started documenting everything obsessively, clearly building a case for some kind of legal challenge. Jessica launched a whisper campaign, telling anyone who would listen that we were abusing our power, that we were mentally declining but too stubborn to admit it, that we were ruining Michael's career out of jealousy. Some people believed her. We lost a few friends over it.
But the company stabilized. With oversight in place, Michael couldn't make reckless decisions. We renegotiated some of the terms with the venture capital firm. They were actually relieved to discover there was adult supervision in place. We reinstated the scholarship program, which got some positive press and reminded people what the company stood for. Morale among longtime employees improved dramatically. The numbers bore it out too. By November, we'd recovered most of the value Michael's poor decisions had cost us, and our profit margins were the healthiest they'd been in 2 years.
Michael hated every second of it. You could see it eating him alive, having to ask permission, having to justify his decisions, having to admit when he was wrong. His pride couldn't handle it. Jessica's pride couldn't handle it. They'd gotten used to being the unquestioned rulers of their little empire, and suddenly they were accountable again. In December, Michael came to my office. He still had his office, still had his title, still had his salary, but he came to me like an employee, not like my son, and he said, "What do I have to do to get you to back off?"
I wasn't in that conversation, but Henry told me about it later. He said Michael looked exhausted, defeated. Henry almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He told Michael, work with us, not against us. Stop treating the company like it's yours alone. Rebuild the trust you broke. Prove you can be the leader we thought you were. And Michael said, I can't work like this, with you constantly looking over my shoulder, questioning every move I make. Either you trust me or you don't. Henry said, son, trust is earned. You lost ours. Now you have to earn it back.
Michael resigned a week later. Didn't even give us the courtesy of a personal conversation. Just sent a formal letter through his attorney announcing his immediate resignation as CEO, his resignation from the board, and his intention to sell his shares back to the company. The letter said he was pursuing other opportunities more aligned with his vision and values. Translation: he'd rather walk away from everything than work under his parents' authority. It was the most childish, self-destructive thing he could have done, and it broke both our hearts.
But here's the thing about pride, it makes you stupid. Michael assumed his resignation would hurt us, that the company would struggle without him, that we'd come crawling back begging him to return. What he didn't realize was that we'd been running companies since before he was born. Within 48 hours, Henry had promoted David Chin to interim CEO. David knew the business inside and out, had the respect of the employees, and most importantly, understood that stewardship matters more than glory. The transition was seamless.
We bought back Michael's shares at fair market value, 35% over what he'd offered us, because we weren't trying to cheat him, just protect ourselves. He walked away with almost $9 million, plus whatever he'd already taken in salary and loans. Not a bad outcome for someone who had contributed 8 years of work, most of it under supervision. But it wasn't enough for him. It's never enough for people like that. The problem wasn't the amount, it was that he wanted everything without earning it, wanted respect without giving it, wanted the crown, but not the responsibility.
Jessica filed for divorce 6 months later. Once Michael wasn't the Golden Boy CEO anymore, once the magazine interviews dried up and the social status evaporated, she lost interest fast. She got the house we'd helped them buy, half of his settlement money, and disappeared into her next venture. Apparently she's a life coach now, teaching people about resilience and overcoming adversity. The irony would be funny if it weren't so sad. Michael moved to California, started some kind of tech consulting firm that I don't think ever really got off the ground. We hear about him occasionally through mutual acquaintances, but he never calls, never writes.
So where does that leave us now, 3 years later? The company is thriving. David Chen became permanent CEO, and he's done phenomenal work. We've expanded into sustainable logistics, electric vehicle fleets, renewable energy sourcing. The scholarship program now funds 400 students a year. We're respected in the industry not just for our business success, but for our ethics and our commitment to community. Martha and I still sit on the board, but we've finally achieved the semi-retirement we'd wanted. We travel, we read, we spend time with our real friends.
And we have each other. I think that's what Michael and Jessica never understood. They thought the business was the prize, but the business was just a business. The real prize was building something together, side by side, for 50 years and counting. Every major decision we made together. Every crisis we faced together. When Michael tried to divide us, tried to make Henry doubt me or me doubt Henry, it didn't work because our foundation was too strong. That's what a real partnership looks like.
People ask us sometimes if we have regrets, if we wish we'd handled it differently, been more lenient, given Michael more chances. And honestly, no. We gave him every opportunity to do the right thing. We warned him, we tried to work with him, we offered compromise after compromise. He chose Jessica's poison over our guidance. He chose ambition over integrity. He chose to see us as obstacles rather than allies. Those were his choices, not ours. We only controlled our response, and I'm proud of how we responded.
The hardest part is the loss itself. Not the money or the company drama, but the loss of the relationship. I mourn the son I thought I had, the one who'd call me just to chat, who'd ask my advice about things, who'd bring his future children to meet their grandparents. That son apparently never existed, or if he did, he disappeared somewhere along the way. Maybe Jessica changed him, or maybe she just revealed what was always there. Either way, he's a stranger to me now. I see his face in old photographs and feel like I'm looking at someone I used to know.
But you know what? We're okay. Better than okay, actually. We sleep well at night because we know we acted with integrity. We have friends who respect us, employees who trust us, a legacy that extends beyond balance sheets and profit margins. We have scholarship recipients who send us their graduation photos, who name their kids after us, who credit us with changing their life trajectories. That matters more than having a son who sends obligatory birthday cards.
I do hope, someday, that Michael finds whatever it is he's looking for. I hope he learns that success without character is just noise, that money without meaning is just numbers, that pride without humility is just loneliness. I hope he meets someone who loves him for who he is rather than what he has. I hope he builds something that makes him proud in a real way, not just a performative way. And I hope, though I don't expect it, that maybe one day he'll call and we can have an honest conversation about what happened.
But we're not holding our breath. And we're not going to spend our remaining years waiting for a redemption that might never come. We built a good life. We built a good business. We treated people with dignity and respect. We fought back when we were attacked. We protected what mattered. If our son can't see the value in any of that, if he's chosen bitterness over reflection, that's his burden to carry, not ours. We're free of it. We're free of him. And there's a certain peace in that freedom.
The story we're telling you isn't really about revenge, though I suppose that's how some people frame it. It's about boundaries. About knowing when love requires you to say no. About understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone experience the consequences of their choices. We didn't destroy our son's career, he did that himself by prioritizing appearance over substance. We just refused to be destroyed along with him.
And you know what the funny thing is? The company is worth almost $90 million now. If Michael had just been patient, if he'd worked with us instead of against us, if he'd waited for the natural transition we'd always planned, he'd be running a $90 million company right now with our full blessing. Instead, he walked away with $9 million and a bruised ego. The math alone should tell you something about the cost of impatience and pride.
So if you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, here's what we'd tell you: document everything. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself legally before you need the protection. Don't let sentiment override survival. Love your children, but don't let them abuse you. And remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do for the next generation is show them that actions have consequences, even when those actions come from family.
I want to tell you about one more thing that happened. About 6 months after Michael left, we were at a charity gala, one of those rubber chicken dinner events where businesses donate and network and pretend to care about causes they'll forget by next week. But Martha and I actually care. We were there to present a scholarship award to a young woman named Sophia who'd overcome incredible odds to get into engineering school. We'd been funding her education for 3 years, and watching her succeed was genuinely meaningful to us.
Sophia gave a speech that night, and it was beautiful. She talked about growing up in poverty, about her single mother working 3 jobs, about almost giving up on college because the financial barriers seemed impossible. Then she said something I'll never forget: there are people in this room who don't know me, who've never met me, who decided my dream was worth investing in. Henry and Martha Carter gave me more than money. They gave me permission to believe I deserved a chance. The whole ballroom stood up and applauded, and I looked at Henry with tears streaming down my face.
And in that moment, I realized I was crying not just from pride but from grief. Because Michael should have been there. He should have been part of that moment, should have understood what real legacy looks like. Instead, he was somewhere in California, probably posting on LinkedIn about disruption and growth mindset, and whatever other hollow buzzwords make people feel important. He traded meaning for status, and he didn't even realize what he'd lost.
After the ceremony, as we were leaving, we ran into someone we hadn't expected to see, Jessica. She was there with some new boyfriend, another young executive type with too much confidence and too little substance. She saw us, and for a second, I thought she might pretend she hadn't. But she walked over, her smile tight and artificial, and said, "Henry, Martha, how lovely to see you." Like we were acquaintances who'd lost touch, not family members she tried to destroy.
I should have just nodded and walked away. That would have been the classy move. But I'd had 2 glasses of wine, and I was still emotional from Sophia's speech, so I said, "How's Michael?" Jessica's smile flickered. She said, "He's doing well, building something new." I said, "Good. Tell him we said hello." And she said, I swear to God, she actually said this, "Maybe it's better if I don't. You know how sensitive he is about the past."
Sensitive about the past. As if the past was some unfortunate misunderstanding rather than a series of deliberate choices he'd made. As if we were the problem for remembering instead of him being the problem for acting. Henry just laughed, this short bitter laugh, and said, "Yeah, accountability is tough. Tell him we hope he finds what he's looking for." Then we walked away. I could feel her watching us, probably trying to decide if we'd insulted her, but I didn't care anymore. She was part of a chapter of our lives that was closed.
Driving home that night, Martha said something that stuck with me. She said, "You know what the real tragedy is? It's not that Michael failed. Failure is human. We've all failed. The tragedy is that he can't admit he failed. He has to rewrite history, make us the villains, convince himself he's the victim. Because if he admitted the truth, that he got greedy and stupid and mean, he'd have to look at himself honestly. And that's harder than blaming us."
She was right. Michael's real prison isn't his damaged career or his failed marriage or whatever financial struggles he might be facing. His real prison is his inability to learn from his mistakes because he won't acknowledge he made any. He'll spend the rest of his life telling people about his difficult parents who didn't understand modern business and held him back. He'll be the hero of his own story, which means he'll never grow, never change, never find real peace.
Meanwhile, we get to wake up every morning in a home we own, surrounded by memories we're proud of, knowing we lived according to our values even when it cost us. We get thank you letters from scholarship students. We get invited to employee weddings and baby showers. We get to look at our bank statements and know every dollar was earned honestly. We get to look at each other and know we kept faith through the worst storm of our lives. That's not nothing. That's everything, actually.
And we're not done yet. We're 75 and 73 now, healthy and active and still sharp. We've got plans. We're expanding the scholarship program internationally. We're mentoring young entrepreneurs. We're writing a book about ethical business practices, not a tell-all about Michael, just a practical guide for people who want to build something that matters. We're proving every day that aging doesn't mean irrelevance, that experience has value, that you can lose a battle and still win the war.
People sometimes ask if we'd do it all again, knowing how it would turn out. Would we still build a company, still put Michael through Harvard, still give him opportunities, still try to include him in the legacy? And the answer is yes. Because the alternative, not trying, not believing in your children, not giving them chances, that's not parenting, that's just protecting yourself. We did our job as parents. We gave him every advantage, every lesson, every opportunity. What he did with those gifts was his choice, not our failure.
There's one more piece of this story that I think is important to tell, because it's about what happened inside me during all of this. I've spent a lot of time thinking about where we went wrong as parents. Not with the business decisions, those were clear-cut, but with Michael as a person. How did we raise someone who could look at us with such contempt? Where did the empathy go? When did he stop seeing us as people and start seeing us as obstacles?
Martha's been harder on herself than I've been on either of us. I tell her we raised him with love, with principles, with every advantage we didn't have. But she points out things I hadn't considered. Like how we were always working when he was young, building the business, making sacrifices we thought were for his benefit. Maybe he internalized that work was more important than relationships. Maybe he learned from watching us that business success was the ultimate measure of worth. Maybe we modeled the wrong priorities without realizing it.
I remember this one night when Michael was maybe 9 or 10 years old. He'd made the school soccer team and had his first game on a Saturday. Henry and I had a major client meeting that same day, a deal we'd been working on for months that could make or break the company. We told Michael we'd try to make it, knowing we probably couldn't. We missed the game. He scored his first goal and we weren't there. When we got home, he said he understood, that it was okay, that business was important. But was it okay? Did he really understand, or did he just learn to bury his disappointment?
I think about moments like that too. Not just the soccer game, but 100 other small moments where business came first. His school plays where we sat in the back ready to leave early. His science fairs where we arrived late. His graduation parties where we were checking our phones for emails. We thought we were teaching him work ethic, responsibility, sacrifice. Maybe we were. But maybe we were also teaching him that people are disposable, that relationships are secondary, that love has conditions.
And yet, I also know we gave him so much. We were there for the important things. We ate dinner together most nights. We took vacations, went to church, had family traditions. We told him we loved him constantly. We supported his dreams, paid for his education, celebrated his successes. It wasn't all sacrifice and absence. There was genuine love and connection, or at least I thought there was. So where's the line between normal parental imperfection and damage that creates someone who can betray you without remorse?
I don't know if there is a line, or if it's different for every kid. I've read articles about this, talked to a therapist about it, tried to understand. Some kids grow up in terrible circumstances and become amazing adults. Other kids grow up with every advantage and become entitled nightmares. There's no formula. We did our best with the tools and understanding we had at the time. That has to be enough, because we can't go back and change it.
What I've come to accept is that Michael is responsible for his own choices as an adult. Yes, his childhood shaped him, and yes, we weren't perfect parents. But he's not a child anymore. He's a 50-year-old man who had every opportunity to reflect, to seek therapy, to address his issues, to choose different behaviors. He didn't. And that's on him. I can carry the guilt of my parenting mistakes without accepting responsibility for his adult cruelty.
Besides, if our imperfect parenting created Michael, then it also created the values we hold that made us fight back against him. It created our work ethic that built the company. It created our commitment to education that funds hundreds of scholarships. The same childhood that supposedly damaged Michael somehow produced adults who value integrity over profit. So either childhood is determinative, and we're both products of it, or people make choices, and those choices define them. Can't have it both ways.
I've also had to make peace with not understanding everything. I'll probably never fully comprehend how Michael could say the things he said, do the things he did, look at us with such coldness. There's something in him I don't understand, maybe something that was always there, or maybe something Jessica cultivated, or maybe something that emerged from circumstances I'm not aware of. And I've decided that's okay. I don't need to understand everything to move forward.
What I do understand is that we protected ourselves, and that was necessary. That we maintained our integrity, and that matters. That we used our power appropriately, not vindicatively. We could have destroyed Michael financially. We could have sued him for fraud, tied him up in court for years, made his life miserable. We didn't. We bought his shares at fair market value, gave him a clean exit, and let him go. That's mercy, even if he'll never see it that way.
One thing that surprised me is how many people have reached out to us with similar stories. After word got around about what happened, and in business circles, word always gets around, we started getting calls and emails from other entrepreneurs, other parents, other people who'd been betrayed by family members. Some of them wanted advice. Some just wanted to share their stories, to feel less alone. And what I learned is that this is heartbreakingly common.
There's this whole silent community of people who've been financially abused by their own children. Parents who gave everything and got nothing back except demands for more. People who built businesses only to be pushed out by the very kids they were building those businesses for. Families torn apart by greed, ego, manipulation. And nobody talks about it because there's shame attached. We're supposed to love our children unconditionally. We're supposed to sacrifice endlessly. Admitting your kid betrayed you feels like admitting you failed as a parent.
But that's wrong. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting abuse. Being a parent doesn't mean being a doormat. And building something doesn't mean you're obligated to hand it over to someone who'll destroy it just because they're your child. These are hard truths that our generation was never taught. We were raised on honor thy father and mother, but nobody told us what to do when your children dishonor you.
I've started telling people who reach out that you have to separate the roles. Michael is my son, that's biology, that's history, that's unchangeable. But Michael is also a business partner who violated fiduciary duties, a shareholder who acted in bad faith, a person who treated us cruelly. I can grieve the loss of my son while still protecting myself from the business partner. Those are two different relationships, and failing in one doesn't obligate me to sacrifice in the other.
One woman I spoke with, lovely lady named Patricia, she told me about her daughter who'd stolen almost $1 million from their family restaurant through a complex embezzlement scheme. Patricia had discovered it, confronted her daughter, and her daughter had responded by claiming Patricia had dementia and was making false accusations. It was almost identical to what Michael and Jessica tried with us. I told Patricia about our strategy, the medical evaluations, the documentation, the legal response, and 6 months later she called to thank me. She protected herself, reclaimed her business, and cut ties with her daughter. She said talking to me had given her permission to choose herself.
Permission to choose herself. Isn't that sad? That we need permission to protect ourselves from our own children? But that's the culture we live in. Parents are supposed to be infinitely forgiving, infinitely giving, continuer, infinitely available. There's no script for what to do when your kid becomes your enemy. So people stay in abusive situations, let themselves be robbed or manipulated or degraded, because they can't imagine the alternative. They think standing up for themselves makes them bad parents.
But I'll tell you what makes you a bad parent: modeling acceptance of abuse. Showing your children that relationships don't have boundaries. Teaching them that love means tolerating cruelty. If I'd let Michael treat us the way he wanted to, if I'd accepted his contempt and his manipulation, what lesson would that teach? That hard work doesn't matter? That integrity is negotiable? That the elderly exist to be exploited? No. Standing up to him was the last parenting lesson we could offer, that character matters more than comfort, that truth matters more than peace.
Of course, not everyone agrees with how we handled it. We've heard the criticism that we were too harsh, too unforgiving, too focused on money instead of relationship. That a real parent would have tried harder to reconcile, would have accepted Michael's apology, except he never apologized, would have prioritized keeping the family together over protecting our assets. These critics have usually never been in our position, have never faced that kind of betrayal, can afford to be judgmental from their comfortable distance.
What they don't understand is that there was no relationship left to salvage. Michael had already ended it when he tried to have us declared incompetent. When he looked his mother in the eye and said I wasn't his mother anymore. When he chose his wife's poison over his parents' love. The business dispute just made visible what was already true: he didn't see us as people worth respecting. Standing up for ourselves didn't end the relationship, it just acknowledged that the ending had already happened.
And honestly, I'm at peace with the criticism. People who've never been betrayed by their children can't understand what it feels like. The gut punch realization that someone you die for sees you as nothing but an obstacle. The humiliation of being treated like you're worthless in front of employees you've known for decades. The fear of becoming vulnerable to someone who's proven they'll exploit that vulnerability. Until you've lived that, your opinions about how we should have handled it are just theories.
But the people who have lived it, they get it. They understand why we did what we did. They see themselves in our story and feel less alone. And if sharing our experience helps even one person recognize they're in a similar situation and gives them the courage to protect themselves, then going through all this meant something beyond our own survival. That's a legacy too, maybe a more important one than the company or the scholarships. Teaching people that self-respect isn't selfishness.
I want to talk about the business side of this more specifically, because I think there are lessons here for anyone running a family business. The single biggest mistake we made was not having clear, ironclad succession planning from day one. We operated on assumptions, and handshake agreements for too long. We assumed Michael understood our values because we'd talked about them. We assumed he'd respect our wishes because he'd always been respectful as a child. We assumed family love would prevent business betrayal. All of those assumptions were wrong.
When Henry first started the company in 1981, family business succession planning wasn't really a thing. You built something, you handed it to your kids, and that was that. But the world's changed. Companies are more complex, families are more complicated, and money brings out the worst in people. We should have had formal shareholder agreements spelling out every contingency. We should have had buy-sell agreements with clear valuation formulas. We should have had employment contracts for family members with performance metrics and termination clauses. We learned all this the hard way.
Another mistake was not requiring Michael to work outside the family business first. He went straight from Harvard to working for us, so he never had to prove himself independently, never had to answer to anyone who didn't love him, never got fired or passed over for promotion or experienced professional failure in an environment where we weren't there to catch him. That meant his confidence was untested, his ego was unchecked, and he genuinely believed his success was purely about his abilities rather than the platform we provided.
There's this funny thing where if you give your children too much, they start to think they earned it. Michael really believed he'd built the company's success during the pandemic, as if the infrastructure, relationships, and reputation we'd spent 40 years developing had nothing to do with it. As if clients trusted us because of his PowerPoint presentations and not because we'd delivered on our promises for decades. He thought he was the architect when he was really just rearranging furniture in a house we'd built.
I've also learned that you need outside board members from the beginning, not just when crisis hits. We'd operated with an informal advisory board for years, then formalized it too late. If we'd had strong independent directors from when Michael joined the company, they could have served as mediators, provided perspective, helped set appropriate boundaries. Instead, we created a structure where it was just us and Michael, which made everything personal and emotional when it should have been professional and procedural.
And here's something nobody talks about: you need to be brutally honest about whether your children actually want the business or just want what the business provides. Michael loved the status of being a CEO, the income, the title, the respect. But did he love logistics? Did he care about the actual work of moving goods efficiently, building client relationships, solving operational problems? I don't think so. He loved the trappings of success but not the substance. And that mismatch meant he was always going to prioritize appearance over performance.
If I could give advice to someone starting a family business today, I'd say this. First, get everything in writing with lawyers who specialize in family business. Second, require your kids to succeed elsewhere first. Third, have independent directors who can tell you hard truths. Fourth, create clear performance metrics that don't depend on family feelings. Fifth, maintain majority control until you're absolutely certain your successor shares your values and has proven they can handle power responsibly. And sixth, be willing to choose the business over the family relationship if it comes to that.
That last one is the hardest. Choosing the business over your child feels unnatural, almost immoral. But sometimes it's the only way to protect what you've built, the people who depend on it, and your own dignity. Michael forced us to make that choice, and we made it. The business survived. Hundreds of employees kept their jobs. Scholarship recipients kept their funding. Our reputation stayed intact. If we'd chosen family peace over business protection, all of that would have been sacrificed for a relationship that was already dead.
The funny thing is, standing up to Michael probably saved the company in ways we didn't even intend. When David Chen took over as CEO, the whole culture shifted. Employees who'd been afraid to speak up during Michael's reign suddenly felt safe again. Clients who'd been uneasy about the direction we were heading were relieved. Our reputation in the industry actually improved because people respect a company that maintains standards even when it's painful. The business community saw what happened and thought, "Those are people of integrity." That's worth more than any marketing campaign.
And David's been wonderful. He runs the company the way we would have wanted Michael to run it, with competence, humility, and respect for what came before while still innovating where it matters. He includes us in major decisions not because he has to but because he values our experience. He maintains the scholarship program not as an obligation but as a priority. He treats employees with dignity and doesn't see kindness as weakness. That's what leadership looks like, and watching him succeed has helped heal some of the pain of Michael's betrayal.
There's a question we get asked a lot, usually by younger people. Do you think Michael will ever come back? Will you reconcile? And the honest answer is, I don't know. Part of me hopes that one day he'll do the work of genuine self-reflection, realize what he lost, and reach out with real humility and accountability. But another part of me thinks he's too invested in his victim narrative to ever acknowledge his role in what happened. And I've made peace with either outcome.
If he does come back, it won't be a simple reunion. There can't be reconciliation without accountability, and accountability means admitting what he did wrong. Not just vague apologies like "I'm sorry things got hard," but specific acknowledgement. I tried to have you declared incompetent. I lied to investors about company ownership. I canceled Mom's scholarship program out of spite. I treated you with contempt when you deserved respect. Until he can say those words and mean them, any contact would just be reopening wounds.
But I also won't hold my breath waiting for that conversation. Michael's in his 50s now. If he hasn't developed the capacity for honest self-examination by this point, he probably never will. People can change, but they rarely do, especially when change requires admitting you were fundamentally wrong about yourself. It's easier to stay in the narrative where he's the misunderstood genius, and we're the backwards obstacles. Easier doesn't mean better, but it's the path of least resistance.
What I would want, if he ever did reach out, isn't actually an apology. What I'd want is curiosity. I'd want him to ask questions. What was it like for you when I said you weren't my mother? What did you feel when I tried to push you out of the company you built? What would you have needed from me to trust me with your legacy? I'd want him to genuinely try to understand our experience instead of just defending his own actions. That kind of conversation might open a door that apologies alone couldn't.
But again, not holding my breath. The last we heard through the grapevine, Michael's telling people he left the family business to pursue his own vision, and that we couldn't adapt to modern business practices. Not that he tried to steal the company and got caught. Not that he betrayed his parents and faced consequences. Just that he outgrew us and moved on. It's a cleaner story, I suppose, and it lets him be the hero. The fact that it's complete fiction doesn't seem to bother him.
Still, I occasionally imagine a scenario where my phone rings and it's Michael. Not calling to ask for money or offering a superficial apology, but genuinely wanting to connect. Wanting to tell us about his life, ask about ours, maybe even admit that he misses us. I imagine what I'd say, how I'd react. Part of me wants to be cool and distant, to protect myself. But I know that if he really showed up with an open heart, I'd probably just cry and hug him. Because he's still my son, even if he stopped being my son to himself.
The reality is probably somewhere in between dramatic reconciliation and permanent estrangement. Maybe one day we'll run into each other at an industry event or a mutual friend's funeral. Maybe we'll exchange awkward pleasantries and move on. Maybe there will be grandchildren eventually. Michael remarried, we heard, to someone apparently more age-appropriate this time, and they'll create a bridge that couldn't exist before. Or maybe we'll just live the rest of our lives in separate spheres, connected by blood but not by choice.
What I've learned is that you can't control other people's choices, including your children's. You can raise them with love and values and opportunities, but ultimately they'll become whoever they're going to become. Your job is to live according to your own principles regardless of what they do with theirs. If Michael comes back, great. If he doesn't, also okay. My worth as a person, my happiness, my peace of mind, none of that depends on his choices anymore. That's what it means to truly let go.
And you know, there's something liberating about reaching that point. For so many years, our lives revolved around Michael, his needs, his education, his career, his problems. Even during the conflict, he was the center of our attention and energy. But now, he's a chapter in our story, not the whole book. We have other things to care about, other people to invest in, other legacies to build. The world doesn't end just because a relationship does.
In fact, in some ways our life is richer now than it was before. We're not walking on eggshells around Michael and Jessica anymore. We're not dealing with constant tension and second guessing. We're not watching our words or worrying about offending them or managing their egos. We can just be ourselves, do what feels right, say what we think. There's a freedom in that I didn't fully appreciate until we had it. Maybe that's silver lining enough.
I think it's important to talk about the financial reality of what happened, because money was obviously a huge part of this story. When we bought Michael out, we paid him approximately $8.7 million for his 25% stake. That's not a small amount. Most people would consider that generational wealth, set for life money. But it wasn't enough for him because it wasn't everything. And I think that distinction is important.
Michael didn't need more money. He had plenty. What he wanted was control, ownership, the ability to say this is mine and mine alone. He wanted to erase us from the story, to be the founder in people's minds rather than the heir. That's why our presence galled him so much. Every time someone mentioned that we'd started the company, every time our names appeared on awards or articles, it reminded everyone that his success was built on our foundation. And he couldn't stand that.
There's this phenomenon with second-generation business leaders where they're desperate to step out of their parents' shadow, but simultaneously want to inherit everything their parents built. They want the resources without the recognition, the platform without the acknowledgement. It's psychologically complicated, wanting to both be their own person and claim their parents' achievements as their own. Most people eventually make peace with that tension. Michael never did.
What's particularly frustrating is that we would have stepped back gracefully if he'd just been patient and respectful. That was always our plan. We wanted to retire, travel, enjoy our later years. If Michael had worked alongside us for another 5 years, proven his capability and his character, we would have handed him everything with our blessing. Instead, his impatience destroyed the very future he was trying to grab.
The financial aftermath has been interesting. The company's worth about $90 million now, as I mentioned, and Martha and I own 76% between the two of us. We started planning our actual succession, the one that should have happened naturally with Michael, and it's going to look very different. We're setting up a trust structure that will gradually transition ownership to key employees over 15 years after we're gone. Nobody gets to inherit control immediately. They'll have to earn it.
Part of me wonders if Michael knows how much the company's grown since he left. If he's done the math on what his 25% stake would be worth now. He'd have over $20 million instead of the $9 million he got. That's the cost of impatience right there, quantified in dollars. But I suspect even knowing that wouldn't change his perspective. He'd still find a way to blame us for his decisions.
We've also restructured our personal finances to be absolutely bulletproof. Everything's in trusts and legal structures that protect against claims or challenges. Our wills are ironclad and regularly updated. We have medical proxies and powers of attorney assigned to trusted friends and attorneys, not family members. We learned the hard way that you can't assume family will act in your best interest, so we've removed that vulnerability entirely.
And we've been more generous to others because of what happened with Michael. The scholarship fund has tripled in size. We've endowed professorships at 2 universities. We've funded medical research and community programs. Money that would have gone to Michael and his children, if he ever has any, is now going to people who actually appreciate it and will use it to make the world better. That feels like the right allocation.
Someone once asked me if I was punishing Michael by giving away money he might have inherited. I said, "No, I'm rewarding people who deserve it. There's a difference." Michael already got his inheritance, the education, the opportunities, the platform we provided, and the $8 million when he left. He didn't appreciate any of it, so why would we give him more? Inheritance isn't an entitlement. It's a gift, and gifts should go to people who value them.
The truth is, we're having more fun with our money now than we ever did before. We're taking trips we'd been putting off. We're supporting causes we care about. We're helping people who need it. We're living well without apology. And we know that when we're gone, the wealth we accumulated will continue doing good in the world through the structures we've created. That's a much better legacy than funding Michael's lifestyle or leaving him resources he didn't earn.
There's one aspect of this whole situation that I haven't talked much about, which is how it affected our relationship with each other, Martha and me. Going through something like this either destroys a marriage or makes it stronger. Fortunately, it made ours stronger, but there were moments when the strain was overwhelming.
I think the hardest part was that we processed the grief differently. Henry got angry first, protective, defensive, ready to fight. I got sad first, withdrawn, questioning everything, wondering what we'd done wrong. Sometimes his anger felt like too much when I needed gentleness. Sometimes my sadness felt like weakness when he needed strength. We had to learn how to support each other through very different emotional experiences of the same trauma.
There were nights where Martha would cry, and I'd just hold her, not saying anything because there wasn't anything to say. There were days where I'd be so angry I couldn't think straight, and Martha would just sit with me until the rage passed. We developed this unspoken agreement. Whatever either of us needed to feel was valid, and we wouldn't judge each other for it. That permission to grieve in our own ways probably saved us.
But there were also moments of real conflict between us. Times when Henry wanted to take aggressive legal action and I wanted to try once more to reconcile. Times when I wanted to give up and Henry insisted we keep fighting. Times when we accused each other of being too soft or too hard, too naive or too cynical. The stress of being betrayed by our son sometimes made us take out our pain on each other because we couldn't take it out on him.
The turning point came during one particular argument, maybe 6 months into the conflict. Martha said something like, "Maybe we should just give him what he wants and be done with it." And I lost it. I said things about her being weak, about enabling Michael's behavior, about not caring about our life's work. She cried. I immediately regretted it. But instead of me apologizing and moving on, Martha said something I needed to hear.
I said, "Henry, I'm not weak for wanting this to be over. I'm exhausted. I'm heartbroken. And I'm terrified that fighting our own son is turning us into people I don't recognize. But you're right that we can't give in. So if we're going to do this, we need to do it together, as a team, supporting each other instead of attacking each other. Because if Michael destroys our marriage along with everything else, then he's really won."
She was absolutely right. The real victory Michael could have had wasn't getting the company. It was destroying our relationship, turning us against each other, making us blame each other for how he turned out. And we were dangerously close to letting that happen. After that conversation, we made some rules. We'd have daily check-ins where we could vent without judgment. We'd take turns being the strong one and the vulnerable one. We'd never make major decisions when we were both emotional. And most importantly, we'd remember that we were on the same team.
Those rules helped tremendously. We started working together more strategically, playing to our strengths. Henry handled the legal and financial stuff because he's better at that. I handled the relationship management and emotional intelligence stuff because that's my strength. We stopped trying to do everything together and instead divided responsibilities in a way that let each of us contribute what we were best at. It made us more effective and less stressed.
In a weird way, Michael's betrayal reminded us why we fell in love in the first place. We met when we were both young and struggling, building something from nothing, facing the world together. Over the years, as life got easier, we'd maybe gotten a little complacent. But crisis stripped away all the comfortable routines and forced us back to basics. Do we trust each other? Can we count on each other? Are we better together than apart? The answer to all of those was yes.
Now, on the other side of it, I feel closer to Henry than I have in years. We survived something that destroys a lot of families, and we came out stronger. We know we can handle anything because we've already handled the worst. There's a certain confidence that comes from that, a deep security in knowing your partner will stand with you no matter what. Michael tried to take everything from us, but he accidentally gave us that gift.
I sometimes wonder if Michael and Jessica had that kind of relationship, that fundamental partnership where you're genuinely on the same team. I don't think they did. They seemed more like collaborators in a scheme than partners in a life. When things got hard, Jessica left. She didn't stand by him through failure or try to help him rebuild. She just moved on to whatever opportunity came next. That's not a marriage. That's a strategic alliance, and those dissolve the moment they stop being advantageous.
I want to address something that I know some people will be thinking. Aren't you being too harsh? He's your son. Family is supposed to forgive. And I understand that perspective, I really do. Forgiveness is important, and I think about it a lot. But I think people misunderstand what forgiveness actually means, especially in a situation like ours.
Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something didn't happen. It doesn't mean trusting someone who's proven untrustworthy. It doesn't mean opening yourself up to be hurt again by the same person in the same way. Forgiveness is an internal process where you release the anger and resentment so it doesn't poison your own life. It's not an external process where you give the other person access to hurt you again.
I've forgiven Michael in the sense that I'm not consumed by hatred or constantly bitter about what happened. I can talk about it without shaking with rage. I can wish him well in whatever life he's building. I can acknowledge that he's probably suffering in his own way, trapped in his ego and his false narratives. That's forgiveness. What I haven't done, and won't do, is reconcile without accountability or restore a relationship without trust.
People who push for blind forgiveness are usually people who haven't been seriously betrayed, or they're people who enable bad behavior by making the victim responsible for the perpetrator's redemption. They say things like, "You'll regret not reconciling when he's gone," or, "Life's too short to hold grudges." But life's also too short to keep accepting abuse from people who've proven they don't respect you, even if those people are your children.
I've also realized that the cultural narrative around parent-child relationships is really one-sided. We're told constantly that parents should love unconditionally, sacrifice endlessly, forgive infinitely. But what about children's responsibilities to their parents? What about respect, gratitude, basic human decency? Why is it always the parent's job to bend, to accommodate, to absorb the damage? Why isn't the adult child responsible for their behavior?
I think it's because our culture is uncomfortable with the idea that some people, even your own children, might be fundamentally selfish or cruel. We want to believe that everyone's redeemable, that love conquers all, that family bonds are sacred and unbreakable. But those are comforting myths, not universal truths. Some people are redeemable because they don't want redemption. Some family bonds deserve to be broken because they're toxic. And recognizing that isn't cynical, it's realistic.
That doesn't mean I don't grieve. I absolutely do. I grieve the son I thought I had, the relationship I thought we had, the future I thought we'd share. I grieve the grandchildren I'll probably never meet, the holidays we'll never celebrate together, the memories we'll never make. That grief is real and ongoing. But grief doesn't obligate me to accept mistreatment. I can mourn the loss while still protecting myself from further harm.
There's also this assumption that family estrangement is always tragic and wrong. But sometimes estrangement is healthy. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for the other person, is create distance. Michael needs consequences for his behavior if he's ever going to grow. If we'd accepted his mistreatment, swooped in to rescue him after his marriage failed, welcomed him back without requiring accountability, we'd be enabling his worst impulses. Boundaries are actually more loving than endless tolerance.
I've talked to a therapist about all of this, trying to process the complicated feelings of losing a child who's still alive. She said something interesting: you can love someone from a distance. You can hope for their well-being without involving yourself in their life. You can honor the good parts of the past while protecting yourself from the toxic parts of the present. That framework has helped me. I can love the child Michael was without accepting the adult he's become.
And honestly, most days I'm fine. I don't wake up thinking about Michael. I don't spend my time being bitter or angry. I'm busy living a good life, working on meaningful projects, enjoying my marriage, building positive relationships with people who appreciate us. The Michael situation is a sad chapter, but it's not the whole story. I refuse to let one broken relationship define my entire life or cast a shadow over all the good things I've experienced.
Maybe someday Michael will surprise me. Maybe he'll do the hard work of therapy and self-reflection. Maybe he'll reach out with genuine humility. Maybe there will be a path to some form of relationship, different from what we had but still meaningful. I'm open to that possibility. But I'm not waiting for it, not hoping for it, not organizing my life around it. If it happens, wonderful. If it doesn't, I'll be okay. That's the peace I've made.
Let me tell you about something that happened last year that really put things in perspective. We were at a scholarship dinner, celebrating another graduating class of students we'd supported. One young man, Marcus, got up to give a speech. He talked about growing up in foster care, bouncing between homes, never feeling like he belonged anywhere. He talked about how our scholarship wasn't just about money. It was the first time in his life that someone had invested in him without expecting anything in return.
Marcus said, Mr. and Mrs. Carter didn't know me when they decided to fund my education. They didn't know if I'd succeed or fail, if I'd make them proud or disappoint them. They just decided I was worth the investment. And that changed everything for me. Not just my circumstances, but my self-image. If these two people who owed me nothing believed in me, maybe I was actually worth believing in. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room.
After the ceremony, Marcus came over to thank us personally. He brought his girlfriend, a sweet young woman who's in medical school. He told us about the job he'd accepted at an engineering firm, about his plans to buy his first house, about how he wants to start his own scholarship fund someday to pay it forward. And standing there, listening to this remarkable young man who'd overcome so much, I thought, this is what legacy actually looks like.
Because Michael will never create this kind of impact. He'll never change someone's life trajectory just by believing in them. He'll never be the reason someone goes from homelessness to homeownership, from foster care to professional success. He's too focused on accumulating for himself to give generously to others. And that's his loss, really. He'll have money and maybe status, but he'll never have this, the knowledge that you made someone else's impossible dream possible.
I used to think the company was my legacy. 40 years of building and growing, all those employees and clients and contracts. That's what would outlive me. But now I realize the company is just infrastructure. It delivers goods from point A to point B, efficiently and profitably. That's useful but not meaningful. The scholarship program, though, that changes lives, creates possibilities, breaks cycles of poverty. That's meaningful. That's legacy.
We've funded over 400 students at this point. 400 young people who might not have gone to college otherwise. Some are teachers now, some are doctors, some are social workers, some run small businesses. They're scattered across the country, raising families, contributing to their communities, living lives they might not have been able to live without that initial investment. That's multiplication. That's impact. That's worth more than any amount of money.
And none of those students betrayed us. None of them took our investment and then tried to destroy us. None of them looked at our generosity and saw weakness to exploit. They saw people who cared about them, and they responded with gratitude and effort and character. Which tells me that Michael's betrayal wasn't about us being naive or foolish. It was about him being broken in some fundamental way that has nothing to do with how we raised him.
That's been liberating to accept. For a long time, I tortured myself trying to figure out what we did wrong, what crucial lesson we failed to teach, what character flaw we missed in his childhood. But watching these scholarship students, who come from much harder circumstances than Michael ever faced, grow into kind, grateful, responsible adults, I realize we didn't break him. He was either born with something missing or chose to prioritize the wrong things. Either way, it's not our fault.
There's this idea in psychology about how some people are takers and some are givers. Takers see every interaction as transactional, every relationship as an opportunity to extract value. Givers see relationships as mutual, as opportunities to create value together. You can raise two kids in the exact same household, and one will be a giver and one will be a taker, because personality isn't entirely environmental. Michael is a taker. We're givers. That fundamental difference was always going to cause conflict eventually.
What gives me hope is seeing all these young people who are givers despite every reason to be takers. Marcus could have been bitter about his childhood, cynical about people's motives, focused only on accumulating wealth to compensate for what he lacked growing up. Instead, he's generous and optimistic and planning to help others. That tells me that character is a choice, not a destiny. Michael could have chosen differently. He still could, actually, if he wanted to do the work.
I need to talk about health for a moment, because it's relevant to the story and to anyone watching who might be in a similar situation. When all this was happening with Michael, the stress, the betrayal, the legal battles, it took a physical toll on both of us. I started having chest pains that I ignored for weeks because I was too busy fighting. Martha developed an ulcer from the stress. We weren't sleeping well, weren't eating right, weren't taking care of ourselves because all our energy was going into survival mode.
The chest pain scared me more than Henry let on at the time. He'd wake up in the middle of the night with pain radiating down his left arm, and he'd just take some antacids and tell me it was indigestion. Finally, I insisted he see a cardiologist. Turned out his blood pressure was dangerously high and his stress levels were putting him at serious risk for a heart attack. The doctor said point blank, whatever situation is causing this stress, you need to resolve it or remove yourself from it, because it's going to kill you.
That was a wake-up call. I realized that Michael had already taken my company, my reputation, my peace of mind. I couldn't let him take my health too. That's when we made the decision to get truly aggressive with a legal strategy. Not out of vengeance, but out of self-preservation. We needed to end the conflict decisively, so we could move on with our lives before the stress literally killed us.
I think this is something people don't talk about enough when it comes to family conflict, the physical cost. Your body keeps the score even when you're trying to stay strong mentally. The stress hormones, the elevated blood pressure, the disrupted sleep, the weakened immune system, all of that adds up. And for elderly people especially, prolonged stress can be catastrophic. We were in our 70s dealing with trauma that would be difficult at any age.
The darkest irony is that Michael might have actually gotten what he wanted if we died during all of this. If I'd had a heart attack and Martha had been so grief-stricken she couldn't function, he'd have been in position to take control of everything. I don't think he was actively hoping for that, but I also don't think he cared enough about our well-being to consider it a problem. Our health wasn't even a factor in his calculations. We were just obstacles to remove, not people who could be hurt or die.
After Henry's doctor appointment, we made some changes. We started seeing a therapist together, not because our marriage was struggling, but because we needed help processing the trauma. We hired a personal trainer to help us exercise regularly, because physical activity helps manage stress. We started meditating, something I never thought Henry would do, but he committed to it because he knew it was necessary. We prioritized our health in a way we hadn't before.
And you know what? We got healthier. Once we'd implemented the new corporate structure and Michael had resigned, once the immediate crisis was, continuer, over, my blood pressure came down. Martha's ulcer healed. We both lost weight, gained energy, started sleeping better. It was remarkable how quickly our bodies recovered once the stress source was removed. By the time Michael was fully out of our lives, we were actually in better health than we'd been in years.
This is why I tell people who reach out to me, protect your health first. Yes, fight for what's yours. Yes, stand up to injustice. But not at the cost of literally killing yourself. Sometimes the best way to win is to survive, to outlive the conflict, to be healthy enough to enjoy the life you're fighting for. If we'd died during all this, Michael would have won by default. By prioritizing our health and survival, we ensured we'd be around to see our victory.
There's also something to be said for the fact that we're still here, still healthy, still active at 75 and 73. Every year we're alive and thriving is another year proving Michael wrong. Wrong that we were incompetent, wrong that we were declining, wrong that we needed to be pushed aside. Our health and longevity are quiet victories that speak louder than any legal judgment could.
We're planning to live a long time yet. We have more scholarships to fund, more students to celebrate, more trips to take, more memories to make. We're not done. And every moment we get to enjoy this life we've built, every morning we wake up healthy and happy, is a reminder that we made the right choice. We chose ourselves, our health, our dignity. And we're reaping the benefits of that choice every single day.
There's a practical question I want to address that a lot of people ask. What happens to the company when you're gone? Because eventually, Martha and I won't be here to run things or oversee things, and we needed a succession plan that wouldn't repeat the Michael disaster. So let me tell you what we set up, because I think it's instructive for anyone dealing with family business issues.
We established what's called an employee stock ownership plan, an ESOP. Basically, when we die, our shares don't go to any individual person. Instead, they go into a trust that's owned collectively by the employees. Over a 15-year transition period, employees earn ownership based on tenure and performance. Nobody gets to walk in and claim the whole thing. They have to work for it, prove themselves over years, show that they deserve it.
This structure accomplishes several things. First, it ensures the company continues with people who understand it and care about it, not some outsider or family member who just wants to cash out. Second, it rewards loyalty and competence. The people who helped build the company's success get to share in its future. Third, it prevents any single person from consolidating power the way Michael tried to do. The ownership is distributed, which means decisions have to be collaborative.
We also established performance metrics that have to be maintained for the ESOP to continue. If the company's values change, if the scholarship program gets cancelled, if employees start getting treated poorly, the trustee has authority to intervene and restructure. Essentially, we've built in protections to ensure the company we built continues to operate according to the principles we established. It's governance from beyond the grave, in a way.
Some people have criticized this structure, saying we're being controlling even in death. But I see it as responsible stewardship. We built something valuable, and we have a duty to ensure it continues serving its purpose rather than being destroyed or corrupted. If that's controlling, so be it. I'd rather be a controlling ghost who protects what I built than a permissive one who lets it get destroyed.
The employees love it, by the way. They know that their hard work is building toward actual ownership, that they're not just making someone else rich, that their future is tied to the company's success. It's created an incredible sense of loyalty and commitment. Turnover is almost zero. Performance metrics are the best they've ever been. People take pride in the company because they know it's becoming theirs.
And the financial structure means Martha and I can be very generous while we're alive without worrying about leaving nothing behind. We know the company's future is secure, so we can spend or donate our personal wealth however we want. That freedom has been wonderful. We're not hoarding money to leave to ungrateful heirs. We're using it now, while we can enjoy it and see the impact.
We've also set up mechanisms to support Michael financially if he ever truly needs help, not wants, but needs. If he becomes destitute or faces a genuine emergency, there's a fund that can provide assistance with trustee approval. But he can't access it just because he wants more money or regrets his decisions. It's a safety net, not a blank check. I think that's the right balance between familial responsibility and self-protection.
The broader principle here is that your estate plan should reflect your values, not just default to. Split everything equally among the kids. If your kids have proven themselves untrustworthy, or if one has and one hasn't, or if you have causes you care about more than enriching heirs who don't appreciate it, your will should reflect that. Don't let guilt or convention dictate how you distribute what you spent a lifetime building.
I like knowing that long after we're gone, students will still be getting scholarships, employees will still have good jobs with ownership stakes, and the company will still be operating with integrity. That's immortality of a sort, not in the sense that people will remember our names, but in the sense that our values and priorities will continue influencing the world. That matters more to me than any biological legacy ever could.
And if Michael ever has children, and if those children turn out to be good people who embody better values than their father chose, the ESOP structure allows for the possibility that they could earn positions in the company. Not given positions because of their last name, but earned through competence and character. The door isn't permanently closed to family involvement. It's just locked behind merit and performance rather than biology.
You know, one of the strangest parts of this whole experience has been how it changed our social circle. Friends we'd had for decades suddenly got weird around us once they heard about the conflict with Michael. Some people took sides, usually Michael's side, because he's younger and more charming and better at playing the victim. Some people just disappeared, uncomfortable with the messiness of family drama. It was like the conflict didn't just cost us our son, it cost us our community too.
The worst were the mutual friends who tried to play mediator without understanding the situation. They'd call and say things like, "Can't you just talk to him? Family is family." As if we hadn't tried to talk. As if Michael hadn't made it clear he wasn't interested in dialogue, only dominance. These people meant well, I guess, but their attempts to help just made everything worse by invalidating our experience and implying we were being stubborn or vindictive.
I lost my book club over it. These were women I'd been meeting with monthly for 15 years, and one of them was friends with Jessica. Jessica apparently told her side of the story, where we were senile tyrants ruining poor Michael's life, and suddenly the whole group was looking at me differently. Nobody said anything directly, but the warmth was gone, the invitations became less frequent, and eventually I just stopped going. It hurt more than I expected.
But we also discovered who our real friends were. David Chen, who'd worked for us for decades, he stood by us completely. Called regularly just to check in, invited us to family dinners, made sure we knew we weren't alone. Our attorney, Richard, went beyond the professional relationship to become a genuine friend. Our neighbors, who didn't know Michael well but knew us, they rallied around us in beautiful ways, brought food, invited us to events, treated us normally when normal was what we needed most.
There's something clarifying about crisis, it shows you who people really are. The friends who disappeared or sided against us without understanding the facts? They weren't really friends, just social acquaintances maintained by convenience and proximity. The ones who stayed, who listened without judgment, who supported us even when the situation was complicated and messy, those are the real relationships. Quality over quantity, as they say.
We also made new friends, which I didn't expect at our age. Through the scholarship program, we met other philanthropists who shared our values. Through the business restructuring, we met advisors and consultants who became genuine friends. Through the process of rebuilding our lives, we connected with people who respected us for who we were, not for what we represented or what they could get from us. In a way, Michael's betrayal forced us to build a new social world, and it ended up being better than the old one.
One of my dearest friends now is Patricia, the woman I mentioned earlier who went through a similar situation with her daughter. We talk every week, and there's such comfort in being understood by someone who's lived through the same kind of betrayal. She doesn't need explanations or context. She just gets it. And we can talk about the hard stuff, the grief, the guilt, the anger, without fear of being judged or misunderstood.
I think this is important for anyone going through family estrangement to know. You will lose some relationships, and it will hurt. But you'll also form deeper, more authentic relationships with people who truly know you and choose to stand by you. The net result can actually be positive if you're open to it. Don't cling to friends who don't support you out of fear of being alone. Let them go and make room for better people.
Our social life now is smaller but richer. We have maybe a dozen close friends instead of 50 casual acquaintances, and we prefer it this way. We know everyone at our dinner table actually wants to be there, isn't gossiping about us behind our backs, isn't maintaining the friendship out of obligation or social momentum. There's an authenticity to our relationships now that didn't exist before, and I treasure that.
We've also become more involved in our local community in ways we weren't before. We volunteer at the food bank, attend city council meetings, support local arts programs. We're not just writing checks anymore. We're showing up, connecting with people, being part of something larger than ourselves. That's been healing in ways I didn't anticipate. It reminds us that we matter, that we have something to contribute, that our lives have meaning beyond the family drama.
I want to talk about something that might be controversial, the role Jessica played in all of this. Because while Michael made his own choices and is responsible for them, I do think Jessica was a significant influence, maybe even the catalyst, for how things unfolded. And I think it's important to acknowledge that without using her as a scapegoat for Michael's behavior.
From the beginning, Jessica saw us as obstacles rather than family. I don't think she ever really wanted a relationship with us, just access to what we represented, the company, the wealth, the status. She came from a middle-class background and married into what she thought was money and influence. But the reality was that Martha and I lived relatively modestly despite the company's success. We drove practical cars, lived in a comfortable but not ostentatious house, didn't flaunt wealth. That frustrated her.
I remember early in their relationship, maybe 3 months after they started dating, Jessica asked me how much the company was worth. Just asked directly, at a family dinner, like it was a normal question. I deflected politely, but it showed me where her priorities were. Most people getting to know a partner's family ask about hobbies, interests, history, things that help you understand the people. She wanted to know the balance sheet.
Over the years, I watched her systematically work to distance Michael from us. Small things at first, scheduling conflicts that meant they couldn't attend family events, subtle complaints about how we did things, gentle suggestions that Michael was too good for the family business and should be doing something more prestigious. She positioned herself as the sophisticated one and us as the embarrassing provincial relatives Michael had outgrown.
What bothered me most was how she changed Michael, or maybe revealed parts of him I hadn't wanted to see. He started using different vocabulary, talking about legacy thinking and disruption like he'd learned it from a business podcast. He started dressing differently, more expensive and flashy. He started treating service workers, waiters, cashiers, valets, with casual dismissiveness. These weren't improvements. These were corruptions of his character, and Jessica was the source.
But here's the thing. Michael was a grown man. He could have said no. He could have set boundaries with Jessica. He could have told her that his parents deserved respect regardless of whether we met her standards of sophistication. He didn't. He chose to adopt her worldview, her values, her contempt for us. So while I think she poisoned him, he drank the poison willingly. That's on him.
After their divorce, when Jessica moved on to her next target, I refused to call them relationships because that implies actual affection. I wondered if Michael reflected on her influence. Did he realize how much of his behavior had been about pleasing her, impressing her, living up to her expectations? Did he see how she'd isolated him from his family and friends, turned him into someone unrecognizable? Or did he just find new rationalizations, new ways to avoid responsibility for his choices?
What I learned from watching Jessica operate is that some people are fundamentally transactional. They don't form relationships based on mutual affection or respect. They form alliances based on utility. Jessica saw Michael as useful, educated, good-looking, heir to a company, potential source of wealth and status. When he stopped being useful, when his stock dropped after the conflict with us and the resignation, she left. Simple as that. No loyalty, no genuine affection, just calculation.
Part of me feels sorry for Michael in that regard. He thought Jessica loved him, probably still thinks she did, and maybe can't fully process that she loved what he represented more than who he was. That kind of betrayal, realizing someone you built a life with never really saw you as a person, that has to hurt. But that hurt is separate from the hurt he caused us. Both things can be true. He was betrayed by Jessica, and he betrayed us. His pain doesn't erase ours.
The broader lesson here is about being careful who you let into your life and your business. We welcomed Jessica into the family, gave her positions and authority in the company, trusted her with sensitive information. That was naive. We should have maintained better boundaries, recognized the warning signs, protected ourselves better. Not because we're naturally suspicious people, but because trust should be earned over time, especially when business assets are involved.
I do hope Michael eventually sees Jessica for what she was and learns from it. Not so he comes crawling back to us, that ship has probably sailed, but so he doesn't repeat the pattern with someone else. He deserves to experience real love, the kind Martha and Henry have, where your partner stands by you through difficulty and sees you as a person rather than a resource. But he'll only find that if he develops the capacity for it himself, and I'm not sure he has.
Let me tell you about an interesting development that happened about a year ago. We got a letter from Michael's attorney. Yes, he still communicates through attorneys, never directly, requesting a meeting to discuss potential opportunities for reconciliation and to address certain misunderstandings about past events. The letter was carefully worded, probably went through multiple drafts, and avoided any actual admission of wrongdoing while hinting at willingness to move forward.
My first instinct was hope. Maybe he'd done the work. Maybe he'd reflected and grown. Maybe this was the beginning of healing. But Henry was skeptical, wanted to know what had changed, what Michael wanted. So we had our attorney request more specificity. What misunderstandings? What does reconciliation mean to you? What are you hoping to accomplish? The response was telling.
Turns out Michael's consulting business had failed. He was having financial difficulties, not poverty, but definitely reduced circumstances compared to what he'd grown accustomed to. And he'd heard through the business grapevine how well the company was doing under David's leadership, how the value had grown. The letter wasn't really about reconciliation. It was about access. He wanted back in, wanted to be part of the success he'd walked away from, wanted to resume collecting dividends or salary or whatever he thought he was entitled to.
That hurt more than I expected. For a brief moment, I'd let myself believe that maybe he'd changed, maybe he missed us, maybe family actually mattered to him. But no. It was just another transaction, another attempt to extract value. We weren't people he wanted relationships with, we were resources he wanted access to. The realization of that killed whatever small hope I'd been harboring.
We declined the meeting. Not angrily or vindicatively, just firmly. Our attorney sent a response saying that we wished Michael well, but saw no basis for business or personal reconciliation at this time, and that any future communication should only occur if Michael was prepared to acknowledge specific actions and their impacts without preconditions or expectations. Essentially, we put the ball in his court. If you want a relationship, earn it through accountability. Otherwise, leave us alone.
We never heard back. That told us everything we needed to know. He wasn't willing to do the work of genuine reconciliation because that would require humility, vulnerability, admission of wrongdoing, all things his ego can't handle. It was easier to maintain the victim narrative, blame us for being unreasonable, and move on to whatever next scheme might provide income and status. And honestly, that's fine. We're not waiting around anymore.
In a way, that attempted contact was a gift. It removed any lingering doubt about whether we'd made the right decision. If Michael had truly changed, truly grown, truly understood what he'd done wrong, that letter would have been very different. It would have started with apology, not requests. It would have acknowledged harm, not mentioned misunderstandings. It would have offered accountability, not hinted at opportunities. The fact that it didn't told us we were right to protect ourselves.
We did learn later, through mutual acquaintances, not from Michael, that he'd tried similar approaches with other former colleagues and connections. Reaching out after years of silence, testing whether relationships could be revived, seeing if anyone might give him another chance at business opportunities he'd burned. That's sad, really. He spent years burning bridges instead of building them, and now he's discovering that burned bridges don't easily rebuild.
The pattern is clear. Michael only reaches out when he needs something, never just to connect or make amends. When his marriage failed, when his business struggled, when he needed money or opportunities, that's when we hear from him, directly or indirectly. When things are going well for him, we're erased from the story. That's not a relationship. That's a contingency plan. And we're nobody's contingency plan anymore.
I suppose there's still a chance he could do the real work someday. People can change, even stubborn people, even people in their 50s. But it would require hitting bottom in a way he hasn't yet, facing himself honestly in a way he's avoided so far. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Either way, our peace doesn't depend on it anymore. We've moved on. We're whole without him. That's the real victory.
The lesson for anyone watching this who might be in a similar situation: when someone who's hurt you reaches out, Look at the context. Are they reaching out because they genuinely changed and want to make amends? Or are they reaching out because they need something, and you're the most convenient source? The distinction matters. True reconciliation starts with accountability, not requests. If someone won't start there, they're not ready, and you're right to protect yourself.
I want to share something that's been surprisingly helpful in processing all of this. We started writing letters to Michael that we never send. Our therapist suggested it as a way to express the things we wish we could say without actually reopening communication or giving him more ammunition. So every few months, when something comes up that we wish we could share with him, we write it down.
I'll admit I was skeptical at first. What's the point of writing letters nobody will read? But there's something cathartic about putting the words down, organizing your thoughts, saying what you need to say even if only for yourself. I've written letters about my disappointment, about the company's successes he's missing, about Martha's health scares, about the scholarship students who remind me of the son I thought I had. None of them are angry anymore. That phase passed. They're mostly just sad, honest reflections on what was lost.
My letters are different. Some are angry, still. Some are yearning, wishing things were different. Some are updates on family news he'll never know, cousins who've had babies, friends who've passed away, celebrations he should have been part of. Writing them helps me acknowledge that I still have feelings about all of this, that grief doesn't have a neat timeline or conclusion. The feelings exist whether I express them or not, so I might as well express them safely.
The funny thing is, writing these letters has made me realize how much of what I want to say isn't even about him anymore. I want to tell someone how proud I am of David's leadership, how gratifying it is to see the company thriving, how meaningful the scholarship work has become. Michael was supposed to be that someone, the person I'd share victories with, but he's not available for that role and probably never was. So the letters are really about grieving the relationship I imagined more than the one that actually existed.
I keep all my letters in a box in my closet. Sometimes I read through the old ones and I'm struck by how my feelings have evolved. The early letters are raw, full of pain and confusion and desperate attempts to understand what happened. The recent ones are calmer, more accepting, sometimes even boring, just updates on daily life, the kind of mundane sharing you do with someone you're close to. That evolution shows me I'm healing, even though it doesn't always feel like it.
We've talked about what to do with these letters eventually. Burn them? Leave them for Michael to find after we're gone? Give them to a biographer if we ever write that book? I lean toward burning them. They serve their purpose for us, helping process feelings, organizing thoughts, maintaining a connection to the relationship even in its absence. Whether Michael ever reads them doesn't matter. They were never really for him anyway. They were for us.
Our therapist says that unsent letters are a common tool for processing complicated grief, and that's what this is: grief for someone who's still alive, grief for a relationship that ended without closure, grief for the future we thought we'd have. Normal grief has rituals and support systems. This kind of grief is ambiguous, disenfranchised. You can't really mourn publicly for your living child. People don't bring casseroles when your son betrays you. You just have to figure out how to carry it.
The letters have taught me something important. You can maintain a relationship with someone in your heart even after the actual relationship has ended. I still think about Michael, still wonder how he's doing, still care about his well-being in an abstract way. But I don't need to act on those feelings. I don't need to reach out or allow him back into my life. The internal relationship, the one where I hold space for complicated feelings about my complicated son, can exist independently of any external relationship.
Maybe someday we'll write a final letter together, Henry and I. A summary of everything we learned, everything we wish we'd done differently, everything we're proud we did right. A closure letter, even if it's only closure for us. But we're not there yet. The story's still unfolding, our feelings still evolving. For now, the unsent letters continue, a private conversation with an absent son, a way to keep processing what can't be solved.
And you know, there's something freeing about writing things you never have to send. I can be completely honest without worrying about Michael's reaction or how he might use my words against me. I can be vulnerable without risking further hurt. I can say, I miss you, and I'm angry at you, and I'm proud of who I am without you. All in the same letter, contradictions and all, because it's just for me. That freedom has its own kind of healing power.
If you're in a similar situation and struggling with what to say or how to feel, I'd recommend trying it. Write the letter you wish you could send. Get it all out, the anger, the hurt, the love, the regret, all of it. Then put it away and see how you feel. You might be surprised by what emerges when you give your feelings permission to exist without judgment or consequence. It won't fix everything, but it might help you understand yourself better. And that's worth something.
There's something I need to address about regret, because people assume we must be drowning in it, regretting how we raised Michael, regretting our business decisions, regretting the confrontation. And sure, there are things I wish we'd done differently. But the assumption that we should be consumed by regret, that we should be second-guessing every choice we made, that's not accurate. And I think it's important to explain why.
Regret requires believing you could have known than what you know now, and that's just not realistic. When Michael was young, we were young parents doing our best with the knowledge and resources we had. Yes, we worked a lot. So did most parents building businesses in the 80s and 90s. Yes, we probably prioritized the company too much sometimes. But we also loved him fiercely, provided for him generously, and tried to instill good values. We can't regret decisions we made with good intentions and limited information.
As for the business decisions, bringing Michael in, giving him opportunities, trusting him with increasing responsibility, those were reasonable choices based on who he appeared to be at the time. He was educated, capable, showed leadership potential. How were we supposed to know he'd betray us? Should we have operated from a place of suspicion and paranoia toward our own son? That's no way to live or to run a business. We made decisions based on reasonable expectations, and he violated those expectations. That's on him, not us.
The confrontation itself, the way we stood up to him and ultimately forced him out, I have zero regret about that. We protected ourselves, protected the company, protected the employees and scholarship recipients who depended on us. We acted with integrity and appropriate force. If we'd done anything less, we'd have been betraying our own values and enabling his worst behavior. Standing up to your own child when they're wrong is one of the hardest things a parent can do, but it's sometimes necessary. I'm proud we had the courage to do it.
I suppose I regret that the situation occurred at all, but that's different from regretting our choices. I wish Michael had been a different person, made different choices, valued relationships over money. But wishing things were different isn't the same as believing I should have acted differently. I acted appropriately given the reality I was facing. That's all anyone can do.
The only genuine regret I have, and this is small in the grand scheme, is that I didn't recognize Jessica's influence sooner. Looking back, the warning signs were there from the beginning. The inappropriate questions, the social climbing, the way she positioned herself as superior. If I'd trusted my instincts and set firmer boundaries with her early on, maybe things would have unfolded differently. But again, I was trying to welcome my son's choice of partner, trying not to be the stereotypical difficult mother-in-law. Those were good intentions, even if the outcome was bad.
Here's what I've learned about regret. It's only useful if it leads to growth or change. Regret that just becomes self-flagellation, that makes you endlessly replay the past and torture yourself over unchangeable decisions. That's destructive. Productive regret says, I learned something and I'll act differently in the future. Unproductive regret says, I'm a terrible person who destroyed everything. We've chosen productive regret where it's warranted and rejected the rest.
We've also learned to distinguish between our regrets and other people's attempts to make us feel regret. Some people think we should regret standing up to Michael, think we should have been more forgiving or more flexible. But that's their value system, not ours. We make decisions based on our values, integrity, self-respect, protecting what we built, and we're at peace with those decisions. Other people's judgment doesn't obligate us to feel regret.
In fact, when I take stock of my life, I'm struck by how little I regret. I married the right woman. I built a successful business that employed hundreds of people and created value. I gave generously to causes I cared about. I stood up for myself when challenged. I maintained my integrity even when it cost me relationships. Those are choices I'm proud of, not regrets to apologize for.
And here's the most important thing, we're still writing our story. The Michael chapter is part of it, an important and painful part, but it's not the conclusion. We have years left to build new relationships, create new memories, make new choices that we'll be proud of. The story of Henry and Martha Carter isn't defined by the son who betrayed us, it's defined by how we responded to that betrayal and what we built afterward. That's the legacy that matters.
So no, we're not drowning in regret. We're living with clear consciences, peaceful minds, and the satisfaction of knowing we handled a terrible situation as well as it could be handled. We protected ourselves, maintained our values, and came out stronger. If that's not a success, I don't know what is. The absence of regret is a gift we've earned through careful decision-making and consistent integrity. And we're grateful for it every single day.
As we approach the end of our story, I want to talk about something that might seem small but means the world to me. We've started mentoring other elderly people who are dealing with family business conflicts or financial abuse by their children. Word got around about what happened to us and how we handled it, and people started reaching out. At first, it was just answering questions here and there. But it's become something more structured and meaningful.
We meet once a month with a group of about 8 people, all in their 60s or 70s, all dealing with versions of what we went through. Some have children trying to have them declared incompetent. Some have been pushed out of businesses they founded. Some are being financially exploited or emotionally abused. The specifics vary, but the underlying dynamic is the same. Children who see their elderly parents as obstacles or resources rather than people deserving of respect.
What we offer isn't just practical advice, though we do that, how to protect assets, what legal strategies work, which professionals to consult. What people really need is permission to stand up for themselves and validation that their feelings are justified. So many of them have been gaslit by their children, told they're being unreasonable or selfish or crazy. We tell them, no, you're not crazy. What's happening to you is wrong, and you have every right to protect yourself.
One man in our group, Robert, his daughter had been systematically stealing from him for years. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there, but it escalated to the point where she'd forged his signature on loan documents and maxed out credit cards in his name. He discovered it and confronted her, and she responded by telling all their relatives that Robert was senile and making false accusations. He came to us devastated, questioning whether he was imagining things, whether he was being too harsh by wanting to press charges.
We told him, you're not imagining it, you're not being too harsh, and you need to protect yourself immediately. We walked him through documenting everything, getting a cognitive assessment to prove his competence, consulting with an elder law attorney, and yes, pressing charges. It was hard. His daughter was arrested. Other family members accused him of being cruel. But he protected himself, recovered most of the stolen money, and now he's rebuilding his life with clear boundaries and better relationships.
Watching people in our group stand up for themselves, find their strength, and reclaim their dignity, it's been incredibly rewarding. We've helped at least a dozen people navigate similar situations successfully. Some have reconciled with their children after establishing firm boundaries. Some have cut ties entirely. Some are somewhere in between. But all of them are in better situations than when they first came to us, and that feels like our betrayal being redeemed in some way.
We've also learned from them. Every story is slightly different, every family has its own dynamics. We've heard about children who became addicted to drugs and saw their parents as ATMs. Children who married abusive partners who isolated them from family. Children who inherited mental illness that manifested as paranoia or aggression. Children who were simply taught by society that elderly people don't deserve respect. The causes vary, but the pain is universal.
What strikes me is how many of these situations could have been prevented with better cultural narratives about aging and family. We live in a society that worships youth and sees aging as decline. We're taught that elderly people are burdens, that they're out of touch, that their opinions don't matter. Is it any wonder that some children internalize those messages and treat their parents accordingly? We need better models of aging, ones that honor experience, wisdom, and continued contribution.
Some of the people in our group have become dear friends. We socialize outside the meetings, celebrate each other's victories, support each other through setbacks. There's a bond that forms when you've survived similar betrayals and come out the other side. It's a community I never wanted to be part of. Nobody wants to bond over being betrayed. Continuer. By their children, but I'm grateful for it nonetheless.
The group has also given us perspective. As bad as our situation with Michael was, some people have it worse. Children who've physically threatened their parents. Children who've successfully stolen everything, leaving their parents destitute. Children who've weaponized grandchildren, denying grandparents access unless demands are met. Hearing these stories doesn't minimize our pain, but it does remind us that we handled things relatively well, and that it could have been worse.
If you're reading this or watching this and you're in a similar situation, please know, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and you deserve to protect yourself. Find your people, whether it's a formal support group or just one friend who gets it. Get professional help, lawyers, therapists, financial advisors who specialize in elder issues. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And remember that setting boundaries with your children, even adult children, isn't a failure of parenting. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do.
We're coming to the end of our story, but before we close, I want to talk about legacy one more time. Because Michael's betrayal forced us to completely rethink what we wanted our legacy to be. Before all this, I probably would have said my legacy was the company I'd built, and the son I raised to carry it forward. Both of those turned out very differently than expected, and initially that felt like failure. But now I see it differently.
Our legacy isn't Michael. It never was, even when I thought it was. Our legacy is the 400 students we've sent to college and the hundreds more we'll fund before we're done. It's the company that provides good jobs with ownership opportunities to people who value them. It's the community programs we've supported. It's the model we've provided for how to handle family betrayal with integrity. It's the marriage we've maintained through incredible stress. That's legacy.
I think a lot of parents make the mistake of seeing their children as their legacy, as extensions of themselves who will carry their name and values forward. But children are autonomous human beings who make their own choices. You can't control what they become or what they do with what you've given them. If your sense of legacy depends on your children turning out a certain way, you're setting yourself up for disappointment or worse.
Better to build a legacy that doesn't depend on any one person. Better to create systems and structures that outlive you regardless of family dynamics. Better to invest in causes and communities and institutions that align with your values. That way, even if your children betray you or die young or simply live lives different from what you imagined, your values still persist in the world.
Michael probably thinks he destroyed our legacy when he left the company and cut ties. But he only destroyed the legacy we thought we were building, the family dynasty version where our son and his children ran our company and carried our name forward. What he didn't destroy, couldn't destroy, was the actual legacy, the values we lived by, the people we helped, the standards we maintained. Those exist independent of him.
And honestly, I like this version of legacy better. It's less about ego and control, more about genuine impact. When I'm gone, I won't be around to care whether people remember my name. But I'll have lived knowing that hundreds of young people got opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's real. That matters. That's worth sacrificing comfort and family peace to protect.
I've also come to see that how you handle betrayal and adversity is part of your legacy. We could have responded to Michael's actions by becoming bitter, paranoid, closed off. We could have let the betrayal poison the rest of our lives and relationships. Instead, we chose to protect ourselves while remaining generous to others, to maintain our integrity while standing our ground, to keep building even after being torn down. That's a legacy too, showing people that you can survive betrayal without becoming your betrayer.
When we're gone, there will be scholarship recipients at our funeral who'll tell stories about how we changed their lives. There will be employees who'll talk about what it was like to work for people who valued them. There will be friends who'll remember our kindness and our strength. Michael probably won't be there, and if he is, he'll be uncomfortable because all those people will be evidence of the legacy he walked away from. But the legacy exists whether he acknowledges it or not.
This is what I tell anyone watching this. Don't build your legacy on things you can't control, like other people's choices. Build it on things you can control, like your own behavior, your own generosity, your own integrity. Build it through consistent action aligned with your values. Build it in ways that don't require anyone's permission or participation. That way, no betrayal can destroy what you built.
And know that legacy isn't finished until you're finished. We're still here, still building, still making choices that define who we are and what we stand for. The Michael chapter is part of our story, but it's not the conclusion. We get to keep writing, keep choosing, keep becoming. That's the privilege and responsibility of being alive. Use it well.
So yes, we built a company that's thriving without us running it daily. We raised a son who betrayed us and then left our lives. We endured and overcame a terrible family crisis. We established structures that will continue our values long after we're gone. We found new purpose and meaning in our later years. And we did all of it together, Henry and Martha Carter, partners for over 50 years and counting. If that's not a legacy worth celebrating, I don't know what is.
So here we are, at the end of our story. Or at least this chapter of it. You've heard about the betrayal, the fight, the resolution, the ongoing journey of healing and moving forward. If you've watched this far, you probably relate to some part of what we've shared, or you're trying to understand someone who's going through something similar. Either way, thank you for listening.
What we hope you take away from our story isn't that all children betray their parents, or that family business is always doomed, or that you should live in fear of those closest to you. Those would be terrible lessons. What we hope you learn is that you can survive betrayal, that you're allowed to protect yourself even from family, that integrity matters more than peace at any cost, and that your life isn't over just because a relationship ends badly.
We also hope you learn to pay attention to warning signs earlier than we did. To trust your instincts when something feels off. To establish clear boundaries and legal protections before you need them. To value people by their character and actions, not by their relationship to you. To recognize that love doesn't require tolerating abuse. These are hard lessons we learned the expensive way. Maybe our story helps you learn them more cheaply.
For those of you who are parents wondering if you're raising the next Michael, here's what I'd say. Teach your children gratitude, empathy, and humility. Model integrity even when it costs you. Don't give them everything without requiring anything. Let them experience appropriate failure and disappointment. Show them that relationships are mutual, that respect goes both ways, that character matters more than achievement. And then hope for the best while protecting yourself just in case.
For those of you who are adult children who've hurt your parents, whether through betrayal like Michael's or just through neglect and thoughtlessness, it's not too late to change. Real apology doesn't require your parents to accept it or restore the relationship. Real apology is about acknowledging harm, taking responsibility, making amends where possible, and behaving differently going forward. If you've hurt your parents, do the work. Don't wait until they're gone and it's too late.
For those of you who are currently in conflict with your children or parents, remember that you can only control yourself. You can't make other people see reason, acknowledge wrongdoing, or behave better. What you can control is your own behavior, your own boundaries, your own choices about what you'll tolerate and what you won't. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes boundaries are more important than relationships. Trust yourself to know which situation you're in.
As for us, we're doing well. Better than well, actually. We're healthy, happy, purposeful, and surrounded by people who genuinely care about us. We have meaningful work to do, interesting places to visit, and years left to enjoy together. Michael's absence is a loss we've grieved and accepted, but it's not the defining feature of our lives. We're defined by how we responded to betrayal, not by the betrayal itself.
We're also at peace with whatever happens next. If Michael does the work and reaches out with genuine accountability, we're open to some form of relationship. If he doesn't, we're okay with that too. Our happiness doesn't depend on his choices anymore. We've reclaimed our power, our agency, our right to prioritize our own well-being. That's freedom, and it's worth more than any reconciliation that requires us to compromise our dignity.
If there's one thing we want you to remember from our story, it's this: you're never too old to stand up for yourself, you're never obligated to accept mistreatment from family, and it's never too late to choose dignity over dysfunction. Age doesn't make you weak or irrelevant. Experience and wisdom are assets, not liabilities. You built your life, and you have every right to protect it.
Take care of your parents if you're fortunate enough to still have them. Not because they're perfect, nobody is, but because they gave you life and raised you as best they could. Don't wait until they're gone to appreciate them. Don't take for granted that they'll always be there. And for God's sake, don't betray people who've only ever tried to help you. Because one day you'll be old too, and you'll want your children to treat you better than you treated your parents.
And if you're a parent dealing with betrayal like ours, know that you can survive this. It hurts, it changes you, it challenges everything you thought you knew about family and love. But you can get through it. You can protect yourself without becoming bitter. You can maintain your values while standing your ground. You can build a good life even after your children choose not to be part of it. We're proof of that.
We're Henry and Martha Carter. We built a company from nothing. We survived betrayal by our only son. We maintained our integrity through a crisis that could have destroyed us. We continue to build legacy through generosity and values rather than just biology. And we're still here, still together, still standing. That's our story.
Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves, protect what matters, and remember, the world does turn, and you get to choose what kind of person you are when it does. We're the power couple. And we're still golden.